was about to take the TR6 to switch it out for the VW variant, and I noticed the engine was running rough. So I checked and I made sure that everything was okay with the carburetors. Nothing was leaking. I removed the dashpot covers or the fuel ports, pushed them down, and everything, you know, the RPMs would drop accordingly on both sides. So I figured I had ample fuel, and it would barely idle. It felt like I was running on about half the engine. This happened the last time I was driving it, and I just now got around to checking it out. And not sure what happened here, but I've got what appears to be a broken valve spring. So I need to take care of that right away. First step is to remove the spark plug. Oh, this looks like it's, look at that got stuck. The rocker arm got stuck. Or the push rod rather, yeah, there we go. Okay, so there was, and that's probably what happened. Maybe it reached a little too far. I don't know how that, of course, what you see here is now something very loose, but the inner spring is still there. So let's hope that the valve did not touch the piston. If it did, then I'm going to have some more serious issues, but she wasn't blowing any smoke or anything, so nothing more than normal. So anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to pull the spark plug out. I'm going to pack the cylinder with some rope, and then bring the cylinder, the piston up to top dead center. And that way, if when I take all this apart, should this valve drop, it won't drop all the way down, which would necessitate me having to remove the cylinder head. And I'm also shocked. I see this is nicely oiled in the back, but not very well oiled in the front. So, and this engine has been kind of tired, maybe 200-300 miles to a quart of oil. So I'm going to have to go through it. But I'm wondering why, unless it's just the fact I see all this. This is bad. All this oxidation on here. Okay, got the spark plug out, and as you can see, it's badly carbon fouled. So we'll proceed. The distributor rotates in a anti-clockwise, counterclockwise direction, and I have the car in second gear, and I have been moving it forward, and I noticed that it's starting to approach firing compression stroke on cylinder 1, and here's the wire, of course, for cylinder 1. You can see where the location is right here, and now you can see the relative location of the ignition rotor. So what I'm going to do, the cylinder is probably halfway up, maybe somewhere there or less. I'm going to put some rope into the cylinder. I'll cauterize the end first probably, and then proceed to pack it in the cylinder as best I can, and then slowly rotate the engine to where the piston is coming up, where it will compress the rope and then thus hold the valve in place when I take everything apart here. So it's just a matter of feeding the rope in as much as it'll go. May take a pair of pliers and help to push as much as I can in there, but it's taking it readily right now. I have the transmission in second gear, and just as a precaution, of course, I remove the negative terminal from the battery. And now I'm going to push the engine, or rather push the car while it's in gear, and you'll see the rotor start to move anti-clockwise into the number 1 position for I've changed sides, so now I'm working from the passenger side, but I've removed all of the 6 9/16 nuts with the flat washers underneath, And next we'll proceed to lift off the rocker arm assembly. So this looks like it's lifting off easily. Just lift her straight up. May have to put the camera down and do this with two hands, but one of these days this cheap guy will invest in a tripod. One of the things I've learned from working in the plants over the years is to always think one or two steps ahead. Anticipate the unexpected. Always be expecting the worst. And what I've done is I've gone and taken some paper and wadded it up in the area around the push rods, because I need to remove the two keepers. As you can see, there's keepers on here. There's like semicircular keepers on each side. This one, it looks like the top of the valve has actually been kind of hammered down. So I may have to gently shave that. We'll see how things go. But what I need to do is take a socket, put it on top, and then give it a quick wrap. That will usually break loose any of the hydrocarbons that are causing this to stick. Because what will happen is those little keepers, they're tiny, about this big, 1/4 inch or so. And if they go down into the engine, well, that can be catastrophic. So the idea is to basically minimize that likelihood of happening. So what I've done is I take a socket and you basically place it right on the top. Make sure it's large enough to go around everything. And then you hold the socket with your left hand, with your right hand, you just give it a wrap, 1 or 2 wraps. And what's happened now, as you can see on the cylinder in question here, number 1, this is number 1 intake, the little keepers here have come free. And there might be still some tension on the inner spring, thank goodness, did not fail. It's the outer spring that failed. And that's why I think we're probably going to be in good shape. But what I need to do now is shut off the camera and get 2 hands in here, one to depress the spring and the other one to remove the keepers. So we have one of the keepers out. You can see how tiny that is. And what I did was I took a flare nut wrench and I basically put it around there, and then I was able to depress, push it down, which then exposed the keeper, and I was able to pull it out. Also note that I have a magnet nearby to mitigate the situation here. I also enlisted the help of an additional magnet. So what I did was, with my left hand, I was pushing down on the flare nut wrench, and the right hand, which then allowed the keeper to be captured. Well, as I take everything apart upon closer inspection, here is this spring, which is broken, the outer spring. Not only that, the inner spring was also broken. So we won't know if we're out of the woods until after we put everything together and do a compression test to the engine. A visit to Steve's Triumph Supply is in order, and I've gone to great pains since I retired of organizing parts and tools and this and that and another. And by the way, none of this is for sale, so please don't ask. I need these parts for myself and my son. Anyway, I couldn't find any springs that were already removed from an engine, but I did recall having stashed away another TR6 head. So it looks like I'll be able to score the pieces I need off this. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't poor boy it like this, but I'm going to rebuild this engine in the not too distant future, so we'll see what happens here. On closer inspection, I'm noting that this just has one spring, one large spring, so that obviously won't do. And as luck would have it, I happen to have another TR6 engine. Actually, I got several, and this one does in fact have the inner and outer spring. I was reluctant to take the springs out of here because now this head needs to come off. This head is stuck on here. So I'll just put another tag, I'll make a note on the tag that the valve has dropped down into the head and not to rotate the engine. So to do this job properly, you're going to have to use a valve spring compression tool. And basically what this does is it grabs the top of the shoulder here on the circular piece It also grabs, these are offset, so it grabs the springs. And then as you tighten the wheel, it pushes down on the outer perimeter, which will reveal the two keepers. It's one of those three-handed jobs where I'm going to have one hand holding this, one tightening the wheel, and then one here to grab the magnet to grab the spring keepers. Okay, I was successful. I managed to get the two keepers out, one there and one still attached to the magnet here. And now you can see how this whole assembly, including the inner spring, is intact. And this valve, well, it was stuck, but now it's dropping down. But you can see what will happen if the spring had broken completely. If the valve, in this case, I'm going to push it down deliberately. Look how it goes down. Now, how the devil do you get that out of there? Because now it's, the piston will hit it. So what you possibly could do is maybe take a magnet and patiently work on it. But again, all I'm succeeding in doing is pulling it, is pushing it in further. So there, it's going all the way. Well, looks like it went all the way into the engine. So now I'll put a tag on this because this is an engine that needed to be coming apart. And I can make a note that the piston, or rather the valve, has fallen into the cylinder. The reason I show this is because sometimes when one wants to replace the valve guide seals, there's a little seal that usually goes around there on Ford V8 engines and most engines for that matter. Sometimes what I've seen done, and I've done this in the past, you had a special tool that I would thread into where the spark plug went, and it would charge the cylinder with air. I'd run it to my air compressor and maybe hit it with 50, 80, 100 psi. And what that will then do is force the piston down, and it would also then allow, it would close the valves. Now obviously you had to make sure that the cylinder was at top dead center. But I'm sorry, not top dead center, but you want to make sure that both valves were closed when you started. So now what's going to happen is as you pull the, as you would take a socket and try to knock off that varnish loose to get these keepers loose, what can happen is as you took the socket on here and wrapped it down with a hammer, you could potentially break the seal with the valve against the cylinder head, which would then allow the valve to drop into the combustion chamber, the cylinder. And then that would necessitate having to remove the cylinder head to fix it, to get it out. That's why I prefer the trick using the rope, charging the cylinder with a bunch of rope and then bringing it up to top dead center, or as much as it can to compress. That would then do two things. It fills the void, but it also helps hold the valve in place. And if it does drop, it's only going to drop a 1/4 inch or so, not like this one, which dropped all the way down into the engine. As I'm cleaning everything up here, I did notice this bronze or brass piece, which fits down in there. I suspect that's for the inner spring to compress against. We'll find out when we put it back together. Okay, retrieve the other pieces, and I've cleaned them up, and now we're ready for the assembly. So now we're about to put everything back together. Of course, you see the inner and the outer spring together there. The two keepers here, and then this piece and this piece fit like this. And this inner spring will actually compress down just a little bit, and then this little shoulder on there will kind of lock onto the spring. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take with the spring compressor, and we're going to compress the unit compress everything as a unit together, and then we'll go ahead and carefully position it here in position, and then put the keepers on either side one at a time. It's important to note to get this thing as centered as possible, absolutely dead center, because as you compress this, it's going to want to walk one direction or the other. Sometimes it may help to actually hold this piece right here, which is grabbing the top of the shoulder here. Hold that with one hand while you're rotating this with the other hand and squeezing the assembly. Because again, this is a very delicate procedure, so take your time. So my first attempt to get it in, it slipped out, and sure enough, the keeper dropped there. I guarantee you, if I didn't have those pieces of paper in there, it would have ended up into the engine, possibly all the way down into the oil pan if I was lucky. I have been fighting and fighting and fighting this and can't seem to get it pushed down far enough to engage the keepers. And then I thought, well, perhaps this shim is causing some issues. So what I wanted to go was look at the other engine that I got the springs from and see if that has this piece. So this engine's from a 1971 TR6, and the car I'm working on is a 1973, but notice that it does not have, this is the engine that I got the stuff from. Now obviously that'll fit on top, but it doesn't fit too well. It kind of wobbles around a little bit. I'm not sure of the purpose of this shim, but this engine didn't have it, and yet this engine was set up with double springs. Well, this is very interesting. Note how short this is the one that was broken, how much shorter it was than this one. So evidently that shim is meant to take up the distance. The other thing that I'm alarmed about is the fact that you can see where this piece was broken from here, and yet this other spring is also broken. Oh, there it is. It's coming apart. Look at that. So it broke in 3 places. Good grief. Well, I was about to celebrate because everything went back together like it should. And I start looking around, and all of a sudden, what do I discover here? But another broken valve spring. So that's number 1 intake and number 2 intake. All the other ones appear to be good. I got a funny feeling rebuilding this engine is going to be my winter 26-27 project, which is no problem. I've rebuilt several of these engines, so it's actually a lot of fun, truth be known. Well, folks, here we go again. This has got that familiar spacer in there. But here's something that's interesting. This is the top part that came out of here that holds the 2 keepers. This is the one which is a 2-piece style, where this piece fits into this piece, and then that in turn fits on top of the valve spring. So now I start looking at this engine. Of course, this is number 1 intake, which I just finished, which is the 2-piece keeper. This is a 1-piece keeper. This one had a 1-piece keeper. This one has a 2-piece keeper, 2-piece, 1-piece, 1-piece, 2-piece, 2-piece, 1-piece, 1-piece, and 2-piece. So it's looking like the 2-piece retainers, for whatever reason, don't make any sense to me, but I'm gonna have to go back and read the book. Although this is on the intake, so I was gonna say maybe the 2-piece retainers were utilized on the intake and the 1-piece were on the exhaust. Truth be known, or well, I don't know the truth, but what I highly, highly suspect is that some jerk, shade tree, jackleg, whatever adjective I can come up with, got in here and just start putting whatever pieces he had laying around. Needless to say, I'm gonna put it back together much in the same manner, with the understanding that in a few months this engine is going to come completely apart and be done correctly. Trying to see if there's some continuity going on here. For example, this is the exhaust, which is the one we just changed, and that is a 2-piece arrangement. That cap, that is, that holds the 2 retainer. These 2 are intake, which both have a solid 1-piece. These next 2 are exhaust, which have the two-piece. These two are intake, which have a single. These next two are exhaust, which have the two-piece arrangement. These next two are the intake, which has this solid single. So maybe that's, I'll have to go back and look at the book. Maybe that's the key here. And so here's a closer inspection of the 71 engine that I'm using the parts from. They don't have that, none of these had that spacer in here, so I'm doing away with that. However, this is an exhaust which had the two-piece arrangement. I think that one had a two-piece, yeah, I know it had a two-piece arrangement. So that was, but here's an intake with a single piece. Here's an intake with a single. Here is an exhaust with a two-piece arrangement. These two are intake, they have a single. Here's an exhaust, and here's an exhaust. They have the two-piece. Two intakes that have a single, and then the exhaust. So this engine appears to have been, at least everything was, there was continuity going on. I think, obviously, the other engine had been gone into where this valve spring had the two-piece cap. Not that that makes any difference, but again, you always want to have everything working equally. And I'm not even sure on spring rates, this, that, and another. Obviously, I just want to put it back together, have it running for the summer, and then we're going to do a total rebuild with all new parts, and everything will be checked and double-checked. So without going into a bunch of technical detail, because it's not really necessary for the purpose of this video, it looks like Triumph used both the single collar and the double collar arrangement. And from according to what I'm reading here, it says here that on later PI, petrol injection models, use the valve collar arrangement on both inlet and exhaust valves as shown in valve A. So that would be that single keeper like that. So evidently they did use them interchangeably, but as we all know, you like to have everything working together in unison, and there should be continuity, there should be equal spring tension, etc., etc. Well, again, we'll address all of that when we put the engine together back, when we rebuild it this forthcoming winter. By the way, I've had this book for perhaps over 50 years. You can see the price was $15. I think it's $50 or $100 today. But there's no such thing as inflation. Oh, we're putting her back together now. Now we just got to make sure that everything is lined up. Right now I'm seeing something that's not lined up here, so we got to double check everything. This continues to get better and better and better. I noticed the little spring is missing there. You see it on the back side there, but you don't see it here. Nor is the darn cotter pin. And here's an old valve assembly, train assembly, rocker arm assembly I'd gotten from a TR6. And notice the cotter pin and the little spring in there. So I'll salvage those parts for the moment. Simply no substitute for having your own hardware store at home. Matched it up with the 1/8 inch clip, or cotter pin that is. The fact that it's just a 1/2 inch too long shouldn't hurt anything. I can trim it if necessary. Okay, we now have the proper spring in place with a new cotter pin. Now we just have to go back to the other side and make sure that all the push rods are lined up with the rocker arm ball pivot. And then once we have that down, then we can go ahead and torque the rocker arm assembly to the specified torque. This was the rocker shaft I got out of my inventory, and I took the spring out of it. And of course I didn't take the cotter pin, but replace that with a new one. But then I also labeled it so that I know for the future that this is incomplete. These springs are important because they keep the rocker arm in the proper position. And that's probably why I had a failure, because not only was the cotter pin missing, but the spring. And I think that shaft had probably walked out, and as a result, it caused these two to fail. The other thing I noticed was that the front part of the engine here seemed to be starving for oil, and that would make sense too, since the oil is kind of fed through the rocker shaft itself. So hopefully that situation will be remedied, but again, this is all a temporary measure because this engine's fixing to be rebuilt sometime in the next year or so. Beginning the assembly process. So it indicates here to tighten the pedestal securing nuts evenly, 26 to 34 foot-pounds. I typically like to work from the center and then work out, and I'll probably do the initial torque at around 20 foot-pounds and then go up to 30. All right, I've gone in here and removed all the spark plugs. Much to my chagrin, they're Champion plugs, which I absolutely do not recommend from personal experience over my decades of playing with these cars. Some people swear by them, I swear at them. Seems like every time I'd buy a batch of 6 or 8 spark plugs made by Champion, one would be bad. So at some point in the future when I do a full tune, I'll replace them with NGK or Bosch or anything but Champion. So now we've got everything torqued down, and the next step would be to adjust the valves and make sure that everything is good. We've reconnected the battery. We will cover the valve adjustment in another video, as this video is already too long. So now we'll go ahead and pull the choke and see what happens. All my life I've had fantastic luck with Triumphs. Look how easy this starts. And upon closer inspection, I see where the oil is coming out like it's supposed to. You can start to see it in between here. So I think we're going to be okay. I think I may investigate the idea of putting an oiling device up near the front of the engine, because if memory serves correct, this being the furthest away from the oil pump, which is right down there, the front of the engine may starve for oil.